That's your.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. And many thanks to organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my views about the cities, about the future, about predictions and big data. So what you see on this both screen is a kind of metaphor of the big data. And you immediately can say that one of the dimensions of big data is still missing here. It's time. So the genius of Lewis Carroll predicted only half of our future where we are now. So it's just space and we have time. So it's a lot of problems how to do with that instead of the real world. So this is the graphical map presentation of this metaphor. This is the title of my presentation. And this is the short layout about what I'm going to talk. So, city is a complex system. Let's repeat that once again, and it will take a couple of minutes. Then I will jump to example. My presentation will jump between examples and generalizations. So it's one of the failures of what we're hoping about the predictions is statutory planning doesn't work anywhere in the world, including China, I guess. I hope from the research point of view. And then we will get back to the complex systems, we will consider different examples, and then I will try to generalize and present to you my vision of the future and prediction of this future. Okay, so this is quite a commonplace you see on two screens on the screen. So when we deal with the cities, with the human-driven systems, we're definitely with a complex system with all the consequences of complexities, bifurcation, multiple equilibriums, adaptations of organization, and all these very nice words. And the problem is that we humans are on two sides of these complex systems. On the one side, where individuals are subjects of the system which system tries to govern. On the other side, we decide on the system. So it makes the system, the city, enormously complex. And it has its consequences. We cannot manage them. This is, again, a metaphor of all this complexity taken together. And the consequences that it's really impossible to predict it in any reasonable way. So I will try to analyze what we can do and what we cannot. So the big data came quite recently. I think Benjamin, it was more or less the same time it became popular when we read my book. And all these very popular images, pictures, came from IBM. Actually, all of us remember that it happened about 10 years ago that IBM put this idea into our heads, trying to sell us servers actually. But what they say was true. So in addition to huge volume, velocity, and variety, there is a huge veracity in the data. So those who really deals with the big data, we were talking about that yesterday with Hamu, that it's quite a mess. So you spend a lot of time for getting this data, and then you spend a lot of time for trying to make sense of that. It's not that fantastic mystery that immediately really reveals you everything. It's vice versa. You try to understand and you don't succeed. What we can't get with the big data is actually the possibility to reveal interactions. That is the issue that we couldn't deal with it before when we have got aggregate data. Having the data at resolution of individual, separate car, a street segment, we really can estimate whether these individuals interact. And these are interactions that make the system complex. So now we are just in front of the possibility to reveal the interactions, to understand the complexity, and maybe try to use it in some way, trying to prove the predictability, or maybe we can prove that the majority of people sitting here came from mathematics in some way. So we can prove negative results as well. Maybe we will be able to prove that it's impossible to predict the future based on this big data. Okay, the examples of big data are numerous. Those I like most, and if this one will work. It says that it's not connected to the internet. So this is the best example of static big data. I think some of you tried this site. So everything which is done on taxpayer money in the United States becomes immediately public. And these are the result of the census, population census of 2010, which are put on the internet at resolution of separate building. So you have a huge map of the United States, as you can recognize here. Every building is represented as a point, and you can query this map and to see population distributions in numerous respects. So it's an amazing example. This example below is a movie. It should run, I hope. Yeah. It's a movie which demonstrates us the additional dimension of the big data, temporal dimension. So it's a movement of cars equipped with some kind of GPS receiver, whatever, in Moscow city. So the resolution of this map is very, very low. It's definitely intentionally because they don't have GPS in every car. So if you will observe this map at close resolution, you will see one moving point or more. But altogether, it's quite an amazing movie. So these are big data. All of us used to that or are going to get used to that. So big data in a modern way is a little bit novel entity we are in front of it. But in some respects, we've had big data for quite a long time. So Israel is a convenient example for dealing with big data because we had the complete coverage of the country at resolution of aerial photos starting from 60s of the previous century. So you have the entire coverage, which is made as an orthophoto. So you can see what happens all over the country during last 50, 60 years. And that was the reason for us to try to test one of the direction of the development of the cities, which is called planning, and try to understand whether this direction succeeds in some way. So the majority of the countries in the world has the planning system which is just the same as in Israel. It's called statutory planning. So people are sitting and discussing, and then they draw a map. This map shows where and which constructions should be erected during next 20, usually it's 20 years. Starting from 70s or 80s, these plans are digitized. And starting from the same period, from the same time, in all these countries which has this planning system, after the plan is accepted, it becomes a law. So to construct outside, it's called blue line, the line which borders the plan. You have to pass numerous number of committees which have to give you a permission, and if you construct on yourself, you are fined, and you can even get kept in prison. So with all these initial conditions, we took the plans of 1982, which was planned for the next 20 years, and just compared it with the reality. As I said, we have a very nice representation of reality in Israel. It's aerial photos are taken almost every 2-3 years of the same place. So we could just choose the years of the photos that were convenient for us. You don't use, for this kind of comparison, the maps of every year. Nothing changes in a year. So you take reasonable time intervals of 5-7 years, depending usually on the quality of the aerial photos for comparison. So we understood that all the development is quite heterogeneous. So we covered quite a large portion, about 10% of the area which is around Tel Aviv City. So we excluded Tel Aviv City by some reason which are not related to the story, and they covered every 5, 6, 7 years the areas with the aerial photos and compared the reality with the planning. So it was with the time intervals of 10 years, and in 2002 a new plan was accepted. So we could compare. And it was a paper of 2012, this compared. So if you consider the total amount of construction, the plan was extremely successful. Towards the end of the planning period in 2000, exactly 100% of the planned construction were erected. So they have estimated properly in 1982, in 1980s, it took about 2 years, the growth of population, the development of the industry, of the commerce, everything was done exactly according to the plan. The big data, which we didn't call big data at that time, but it's the big data, aerial photos that cover the entire country, gave us additional opportunity to check whether it was constructed where it was planned. That was the reason of the plan, not to give to the city to sprawl everywhere. It should be built at the places where we wanted to be built. So it was quite easy. You take aerial photos, you digitize it in some way, automatic, semi-automatic, manual, it doesn't matter. You get all those land uses, and then you compare them to the plan. You have a plan on the right, you have a real situation on the left, and you do that for every 10 years that you decided to compare overlap to maps in terms of operation. So for this specific example, you see that quite a lot of constructions were built, were erected at the places they were not planned. And actually that was a typical situation. What you have to recognize, these are locations with their names, they don't matter. What does matter is a green color. It's called non-conforming development. See, this is the piece of the fraction of construction which was constructed in 1990, 10 years after the plan was accepted, on the lands which were not planned for construction at all. The situation became even more interesting, whereas the research is even better for us in 20 years. You see that green is more than 50% of everything that happened. So in some way, people constructed the exact amount that had to be constructed, but somewhere else, not inside the plan. It looked like that. So new residential developments were expensive and very attractive. They were constructed at places where they were not planned at all. At the same time, there were huge areas inside the planned area which were not used at all. So you see, gray is a fraction of area which were allowed for construction of residential buildings, which were not used, and it was inside the plan. See, the majority of development happened somewhere outside. If you will recall for a moment, even coming from computer science, that to be connected to the city, you need networks of everything. So this discrepancy is close to 100%. You cannot construct 2 kilometers from the city because you need pipelines. So it's somewhere around, but not at the places we are planning. What planners did in 2002, they have included the area of construction into the next plan. So in 2002, with the new plan, the non-conformists decreased greatly to some reasonable numbers. So that was the way it happened. So the discrepancy grew in a huge manner. So almost everything was constructed somewhere else. Then it was included into the plan. So what was the first, the chicken or an egg? So it comes together. It's a kind of self-organization which ignores all our understanding of the future, as it was in 1982. From that on, when we did that, we were actually surprised, because we thought it a kind of a standard planning operation to compare what you were hoping to happen and what happened in reality. It turns out that it was the first publication on that topic, and from that on, people started to compare the plans and the reality, and it always goes a different way. So there are still not that many papers, but it's just the same as we get. So the discrepancy may be a little bit larger, a bit smaller. It's all the same all the time. So you cannot predict the future of the land users. This is the way it's called in urban dynamics. From that example, which is quite pessimistic from the point of view of planning and very optimistic from the point of view of theory, let's get back to the complex system and pay attention on two properties which will be important for us in this talk. So, important to us is the characteristic time of the system. How much time does it take it to change something? So in urban planning, characteristic time is slow. City doesn't change too fast. And there is quite a lot of fast processes in the city, and the most fast is actually urban traffic, which comes to the same situation every other day. In addition to the characteristic time, we have to consider the processes, whether they are reversible or irreversible. So land use development, the development of the constructions in the city, are both very slow and irreversible. And maybe that was the reason that we completely failed with the prediction, and I say that was the reason we completely failed with the prediction of the future with the statutory plan of land use development plan of 1982. So we have examples of fast, irreversible processes as well. And the reversible and slow processes, the best examples are also related to the traffic. It's a kind of public transport which changes slowly but still changes in the cities. And the residential pattern, the distribution of people, these are slow and reversible processes. And let's make a jump now from the bottom right corner of this table to the top left corner, to the fast and reversible processes. And let us try to understand where this situation is open for prediction. See, this is the map of Tel Aviv. On the south is the place I live, and north is the place of the university. And you see that I have, let's go back and forth, I have two options to get to my place. One is using the highway. And on the highway it will take me 23 minutes by car. And if I go through the city, which is much nicer, it will take me 29 minutes. And all this is actually for the very early morning when there is no traffic. There is traffic, but there are no traffic jams. When there are traffic jams, the situation is much worse. You see below the variation of time in the peak hours that it will take me to get to the university by the highway, between 24 and 45 minutes. Almost the same is by the sea, between 28 and 55 minutes. So the variation is huge. But when it's a specific hour, this is 8 o'clock in the morning, it will take me exactly the same time to get to the university by the highway or inside the city. It was not like that 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I always drive from that time on, and right now I always drive at 8 o'clock, which is towards the lectures, which start at 9 o'clock, by the seashore. Because people who visit the city don't know this road. They don't use it. So I knew it, and I always used it, until the company, which name is Waze, which is now sold to Google, came in. So with Waze, with Google, you know in advance how much time will it take you to get from one point to the other, whatever is the route. So it became equal quite quickly after people started using Waze. And this is called in transportation users equilibrium. So this is an example which takes me exactly to the conclusion for this situation. When you know real-time, big information about everything, what happens with the traffic in the city almost immediately gets to the equilibrium. The fast process immediately puts itself to the situation where none of the ways can improve the driving from one point to the other. The same happens with the other example. This is my conclusion about fast reversible process. See, big data on fast reversible process will just take the system to the equilibrium and we will sit there. Nothing will change from that time. Another example of the same sort, of the same kind, which is also related to transportation, is parking in the city. This example reveals some properties of that equilibrium that where you get to when you have big data. It became quite popular even less than 5 years, 4 years, to talk about improving parking in the city and also deal with that a lot. So there was a very popular experiment in San Francisco where they put sensors into the roads every 5 meters and covered the area. It was about several thousand sensors, and the length of the area covered was about 12 or 13 kilometers, I don't remember exactly. And then they decided to adjust the price of the parking place to the occupation rate, where when everything is full, the price rises. When everything is free, you park for free. The idea was to get the price on every street segment to the level where 20% of parking places will be free all the time. So that's what we need. If we want to park at a place which is very popular, let's raise the price there. So they really succeeded. The major parameter of parking search is the search time. The goal of all these changes with the parking is to make us search less. Because when we search for parking, we decrease the speed, we disturb other people who just drive there. So they want us, the city wants us, to get to some place to park and disappear from the road. So the search time really decreases 43%, so it immediately decreases emissions, so the pollution is lower, everything goes fine. What we get with that example, that the resulting situation, the equilibrium we took the system to, is extremely heterogeneous. So the prices on two adjacent segments in that example were different almost twice. So people were ready to pay for not walking additional 50 or 100 meters closer to their destination. This case turned out to be very simple for modeling. It's the same fast and reversible process. You don't have to know that much about that process. It's very close to physical system. So you can develop, and this is one of our recent development, and I think I can run. It's here. Okay, it was fast, and here we can click. So it didn't take time. So you can simulate the search for parking in the city, and with this simulation, you get the maps which are very close to the maps that you get in San Francisco. And again, it's the situation of the fast and reversible process. See, in this process, you can build the apps. You can it's my general understanding of the world right now. So when you get to something which is fast, the last application of ours is actually urban fires. We get very close to the reality simulations. You don't need that much you don't need to invest too much in parameters estimating, and your models are robust. So you have to know the parameters, but not that precise as you have to know for something else. So for instance, oops, this is something, I don't know why, oops. Yeah, there should be two maps of equilibrium prices in some city. I don't know why it doesn't show. So for fast reversible processes in the city, I say that give me an example and I will construct a model in a year, because I have to analyze the data at high resolution. If I have the data, I can do that, just as I work with parking in the city or traffic in the city, so it's very easy. What about slow and reversible phenomena? So if we succeed in this direction, let's go to the phenomena which are more complicated, or maybe another kind. What happens with that situation? So this situation is very well represented by public transport in the city. And this is indeed readily available big data. So the piece of that data is available all over the world. Again, I would say the majority of the stuff which is interesting for the research comes now from Google. Google imposed on the city, on the world, to supply the data of public transport in GTFS format. So now I would say it's not half of the world, but 1/10 of the world is covered with GTFS files. You can download it from half of those who supply. And again, in Israel, which is a very small country, the situation is usually good in this way from the point of view of data supply, so we can download GTFS from the website of the Ministry of Transportation every 3 months if they are substituted by the new one. So you have GIS of the country, you have GTFS data, and in addition, we are working on that intensively right now, you can get the data of the use of public transport from two sources. The source which is easier to get is a smart card database, which is again for the small country, it just covers the entire country. So you have all the troubles of all people when they enter the bus, when they change the line, but not when they get out. This is the system in Israel. It's much less convenient with the cellular data. So we're still play with the examples of the data, which are large examples, but it's not the country coverage. And it's not because of all those limitations of privacy, it's because cellular phone companies usually want you to pay in some way for the data. So here we are in some intermediate situation. So we play, but with the data of some specific week, some country, some piece of the country covered. The results you can get with this stuff is actually related quite directly to computer science, because you have to represent the trips, and the trips on the public transport are not the trips with the car. So the graph of possible trips that you construct should be constructed in a different way. I will not talk about that in this lecture. So recently it's published in the International Journal of Geographic Information Science. It's a very recent paper. So you can represent the trips with the public transport as trips on a huge graph, which is really a very big graph, because you put into this graph both stops, line, and timetable. So this is an example of Utrecht. So for 2 lines only, this is a presentation with some software, I don't remember which one it was, of the graph which is constructed for 2 lines only. It's computationally very intensive, so we have here all possible tricks, including tricks with Dijkstra and tricks with parallelizations, all is inside, but you can calculate the accessibility with the public transport at resolution of separate buildings. It means separate individuals, separate lines, separate stop, and you get this kind of maps, which actually are very well understood by the transportation planning people. You get maps of accessibility. You have two kinds of maps. This is the map of potential accessibility, starting from every building in the city where you can get in a given time with the public transport. It depends also on when you are going to start, in the morning, in the daytime. So you get number of jobs or number of attractions of other kind you can see. You calculate that for public transport and for the car, and you get the most important measure. So for different times it looks different. This is the city of Tel Aviv. What is most important for you as a user of public transport and for the planner who wants to move as many as possible people from the private cars to the public transport because he wants to make traffic in the city a little bit better. Tel Aviv is not better from the point of view of traffic than Beijing. It's always a traffic jam. So you have a ratio of any measure you calculate for the public transport to the same measure you calculate for the car, and you can check whether it's definitely worse public transport, but how many times worse? So generally in Tel Aviv it's 3 times worse. So it takes about 50% additional time to get somewhere with the public transport, and the number of facilities you can reach, it's a square of this difference, so it's 3 times lower. And what this example was used for, it was used for the comparison between the old public transport system that we had until 2012 and the new public transport system. So at the resolution, from their point of view, it was general improvement. From the point of view of the users to whom I belong, nothing has been changed. So it has been changed a little bit. So it was indeed the calculations that everything was planned based on aggregate data of transportation analysis zones, which are the areas where about 1,000 people live. So when you calculate it properly, you really have a general improvement. You see those relative numbers to the right are the numbers of improvement or decrease in the service. The majority of the map is green, so generally it was improved, but some places became worse. And what is even more striking is the influence of additional facilities that we introduce. So this is the map of average travel time from every location in the city, everywhere. So you have origin-destination matrix, you know how many people want to ride from one place to the other. And this is the analysis that you can do with this kind of data, with the big data, of the improvement of the new line, which duplicates the future metro line. So that was the new line which was intended to improve the transportation for the people who live around. And actually, it improved it only for the place, for the area where I live, in the south of the city, which is called Jaffa. So for us, it's actually an improvement. So to get to the places the people of Jaffa have to get, now with this line, we have to spend 2 minutes less. For the rest of the people, it didn't change anything. They have different other possibilities which existed before. So what did we do with all this bunch of huge data that we employed here and huge computations? We did adequate assessment of the system. It's still not a prediction. It's still not the understanding what will be in the future. To get to the future, we have to understand what we can do with that system. And the last step we are working on which right now is the change of the system of public transportation planning. We understand now, based on this kind of assessment, that when we are sitting, discussing, and talking, that we have to move these people from the south of the city to the north, and these people from the north to the south, we are not able to estimate the consequences of this stuff. If we will calculate the consequences based on all this data, we will have maps that something a little bit improves, something a little bit decreases the accessibility, but it doesn't change much. So the situation has to be resolved in a different way. And the way which is now intensively developed in several places, so this is a European project, is to make the system of public transportation constantly evolving in respect to the changing demands of the population. So big data, which we have now, which are mostly mobile phone data and including the cards, the smart card in the buses, make possible to estimate the flows of individuals in the city. These flows are flows of every citizen, those who use public transport and those who use cars. So when you separate between these two components, you can do that. It's not that precise, but largely you can do that. You can understand that there is a flow which of a cars from one place to the other, people who drive their cars, which is not served by the public transport. So you change the public transport in some way to accommodate this flow, maybe on account of some other flow which is served too much. So this is a constant adaptation of the public transport to the demands of the population for traveling. The disadvantage is that we will have to change, maybe a little bit, maybe more, our habits. So instead of one bus, you will take the other bus. So this stuff became a research project which is in development right now. And this is the way it looks, and we can run another movie. So there are buses which start randomly, and then they try to accommodate the flows of population. So the flows of population are known from the cell phone data, and the approach for estimating that will like most is genetic algorithms. So the entire network is an individual, and the gene is a line between two terminal stations. So it's also kind of computational problem because you have to calculate your kth shortest path. You calculate how many people you accommodate traveling by different paths from between two stations. So these are alleles of the genes, and all this is running ahead, takes quite a lot of time. And it's again, I apply to people who deal with computations. So I need performance. And performance of the stuff that I do is insufficient. So when I increase the examples from several lines to the city, it runs for full days and even more, and still does not converge to the place I need. So this is the place we're now with the project. So we are running for performance and we didn't find it. But this is a general approach which I believe is the future of the slow reversible process. We have to change together with the system, and to always follow the changing demand in this example. So now we can apply to every cell of this table. So I put aside irreversible and fast processes, and I put a black swan on that place. So if there is an earthquake, a huge fire in the city, the system starts again. It has a situation, it has an initial condition, which can lead to different development. I cannot manage that stuff. I fail completely when I try to predict something which is irreversible. When you construct, you cannot destroy that. And a slow process. So I get back to the statement that Benjamin presented my lecture. You cannot predict the future. I say I'm completely fine. I'm successful with the fast and reversible process. What process I encounter, I immediately construct the model, and it goes well with that stuff. So here is the place in the table, the cell in the table, where I have to change my understanding of what I can do with the complex system of the city. Instead of trying to predict it, I go to coevolution, the evolution of the components that move together ahead, and what I do, putting myself on the level of manager of the system. I try to direct this evolution. I see with the help of the models that there is an unserved flow of the travelers between this and that location. So I try to play with the system within the model, putting this new line, cancelling or changing another lines, and estimating whether the service becomes better. When it becomes better, I really propose it to the population. And here is a catch. Actually, what I don't know about the city is how population will react. And each of us is a user of the system, of the large system, huge system, which is called the city. And our behavior is not too rational in this respect. The city authorities, the planners, give us a new bus line. We don't like it. We get used to the old one. This one is 1 minute faster. It's just the same. So this is actually an unknown in all the nice system of a city understanding that I'm trying to construct for myself and for you. We don't know public reaction to changes. Something will be accepted, something will not. And those of us who deal with people know that nothing can help actually in this respect. There are two kinds of surveys we always employ. One of them is called survey of revealed preferences. So something happened, and then you come to the people and ask them whether you like it or not. Okay, but this is about something that has already happened. Trying to understand the future, we apply what is called the stated preferences survey. So you ask people, will you use that bus? Will you buy that product that we want to sell? So commercial companies, they repeat these stated preferences all the time. You get phone calls or whatever. If you don't know that, if you don't read this kind of paper, you will know from yourself that you usually answer either what the surveyor wants you to reply. You feel in some way that you want to, that the person who calls you, asks you in the street, wants to hear positive reply, so you reply positive. And if your mood is bad, you don't like the situation, you answer negative. So there is quite a bunch of papers which prove that the result of the stated preferences survey worth nothing. So that turns to be a critical point with all the nice intentions to evolve, to predict. And the light comes from my point of view with the latest fashion, which became very popular, which became very fast entering last couple of years, not more. This is called serious games. And serious games is again computationally quite intensive procedure. Let's run this serious game, which is a very primitive game. It's two-dimensional game. You're just sitting on the in front of the screen, trying to drive and park. So let's go ahead with this movie. So this row shows where is your destination. You drive intentionally too fast just to make movie faster. Red points are occupied parking, green points are unoccupied parking, big point means that you can park here. So you students, mostly but not necessarily students, are sitting in front of screen trying to play, and you pay them for those games. It's one of the conditions. Those who park fast and don't spend additional time are paid more. Those who don't succeed to get to some parking place and to park and get to their destination in 4 minutes are fined, and their total gain is close to zero. So people quite invest in this kind of games. And then you can repeat everything, including the trajectories, and you really understand what do they do and what is the set of conditions where they behave not rationally. For instance, in this specific experiment, it all depends on the price, on the ratio of price between lot parking and curb parking. And there is an interval of this ratio where the population is distributed between different kinds of behavior. So if you want, you are a planner, you want to behave, all people to behave rationally and respond to your prices. You don't have to put ourselves in this kind of a corridor between close to one ratio between lost parking and price parking. So you have to be either here, either there. In this situation, we will fluctuate, we will behave unpredictably. All this stuff becomes even more realistic, and people behave much better when this is a three-dimensional game. So if you are going to go to the game, you cannot start with this very nice kind of gaming. You will not understand how people react to your stimuli in the game. So you have to build it just as you do with the model, starting with something very primitive, usually two-dimensional, that you can develop fast, quickly, in a month or two. Then you try, it is a very simple example, how people react to a system. It's a kind of a user interface development, which should be very serious, because people have to react properly on the stimulus you put into the system. And then you understand how you will construct something which will take much more time, because in three-dimensional games you have quite a problem of fuzziness. You get sick when you are playing. If you have ever played with this, it's always that Oculus, definitely a helmet with Oculus eyeglasses, because if you are in front of the screen you have too many stimulus around. But the Oculus is very cheap, it's $300. So this is the state we are now with the games. You cannot start with too complex games, because again, you cannot understand the behavior of the people in the same way as you do not understand it in the real world. All this actually is an encouraging news, because you see that in games, people behave more or less in the same way your intuition said as in the real world. See, the difference between the game and the real world is that the real world has only one dimension in time, go forward. In the game, the time becomes a kind of reversible process. So you can repeat the development in this and other way, and you will get different kinds of behavior, different kinds of reaction. See, this seems to be the future. Maybe it's not the best future we can imagine, but I see the future of urban development in the way that the company we apply for making surveys in the reality does. This company pays to 50,000 people in Israel for participating in surveys. It's a huge sample. This sample contains people of different ages, different social position, different earnings, different marital status. So when you want to know something about a specific group of population, you give your constraints to that company. The sample is still from the population, which is not small. So if you want young men of the student age, you still have several thousands of them in that 50,000 selection, 50,000 set. So you do believe that these 500 people you sampled from those 5,000 represent the entire population of Israel. So this is my view of the future city. So in the future city, you will have 50,000 or 500,000, depending on the country, of players for whom you will construct the game of the development of public transport in Tel Aviv for the next 10 years. They will stay in their homes where they really live, they will go to their jobs where they really work, and they will play those games, young men of student age, all the ladies which are close to the pension age, and then you will decide whether the city functions better, whether the development fits better to your understanding as a manager of the city to the city. We will become, all of us, we will be a part of the sample, a kind of a laboratory mice. But I think we have no choice. This will be our future in the city, playing games with in front of the models that provide to the city manager, to the governance, possible ways of development, of public transportation with genetic algorithm, of land uses, and on this base, we will constantly update our plans every year or 10 years. It depends on the characteristic time of the process. Land use plans you will not change every year, but you will definitely change them more frequently than once in 20 years. If you will see that some development happens in places where each of us is interested in establishing some mode, and in our games we reveal that, so the plan will be changed to make more of that place if it does not disturb to some other intention of the system. So this co-evolution I see as a future instead of prediction. And let's check I think it will happen, this future will happen very soon. I think it will happen in next decade. So I think each of us will be able to check whether my forecast of the future is correct or not. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Isaac. Questions?
So question please.
Good morning. Thank you, Professor, for your talk. My name is Ivan Cabezas from Colombia. I would like to share with you some of my concerns. Perhaps not questions, but I would like to have your opinion. So, in order to predict the future, when do you expect that in the big data we will see the B of vigilance? I mean, there is a lot of concerns related to privacy and security of data. Also, veracity, as you mentioned in this model, is quite important. So my first question will be, do you expect to see a B for vigilance in the data?
I would say we have no choice. Maybe I'll take a microphone. We have no choice. My example is from Israel. So we have, I would say, clever law of privacy. It's not something is 100% forbidden, something permitted. See, when you want to get to the data, the person who is responsible is making a kind of a logical algorithm. He tries to understand whether I will be able to recognize a specific person. If the person succeeds, the committee succeeds, I will not get an access to the data. So theoretically, it's fine. And it worked properly until Facebook came in. So I get an access to the population data in 1990, and I couldn't share it, and I could analyze every person in the city, in the country. It was fine. Now you can, if you have time and money for hacking, you will get whatever you like, even in Israel, where the law is extremely strict, so you cannot get it in an official way. So I wouldn't say I'm frustrated. I'm a researcher. So my view is that it is an inevitable situation. Everything will become public, and there will be evidently very negative use of all this data. Well, this is the future. So we cannot. This is my forecast again. So there is no choice. So let's use it for good.
I hope so. So my second question is a collateral question. I mean, it's perhaps more related to smart cities. We have, I mean, there are a lot of projects involved in the smart cities, and sometimes I think they may be quite futuristic or with great expectations. My particular concern to share with you is from where do you think the resources will come out? For instance, I mean, the municipality sometimes is interested in traffic and so on of well-being of situations. Also, private companies, such as you mentioned, waste, are doing an interesting job. But from where do you expect the main resources will arise in order to make the smart cities sustainable?
There are no resources. So this is our part as researchers, to make all those changes a kind of win-win game. The parking process is a good example. You use, when you park on street, a public space, you have to pay for that. So the task of the authorities is to convince us citizens to pay for parking on street, which is in the majority of cities is free. Until they will do that, nothing can change. When it will change, they will have the resources to invest in some development. The same with this simple example is the heterogeneous prices. You live in a place where the demand for parking is higher than average, than the capacity. So let's increase the price. Some of us, will just get rid of the car and use public transport. See, nothing about that. We will not have more money to make the city smarter. We as a researcher, that's just something to city authorities, whether they will accept that or not. We will have to develop a game for them to see that the outcome will be possible. I really believe it will happen, because at least in Israel they talk to us in this respect. I don't see other ways. There's no money.
We are still delay. Probably if you are interested. Steven. This is one question.
Yes. Me?
Yes.
Just more conceptual kind of question. Since you were mentioning the metrics of 2 by 2 time and reversibility and sort of techniques that every square needs to be. And you mentioned one thing, and I want to just recall that. I don't know if you're, last year we had a keynote speech, and the concept we were trying to discuss was that of anti-fragility rather than robustness. Okay? And it is my belief, I don't know if you're acquainted with the idea that we sit down and others have been exploring, of seeing the city as its capacity to evolve, co-evolve, and co-evolve. Not just to have as an objective planning, to have a robustness, or some say resilience, so now you have urban resilience and so on, but this specific idea of anti-fragility, which means basically we share the same idea. You can't predict the future, especially in some spheres, in some circumstances. What you can do, which is more accessible as a practice, as a planning practice, is actually to detect whether what you're doing to the system, to your plan, to your project, to your intervention, whether you are fragilizing the system, whether you are making it more robust, or whether you are anti-fragilizing, which means that you're making it be the system more fit to the unpredictable. I don't know what is going to happen, but I want my system to react positively, to be able to improve itself when something unpredictable, volatility, stress, whatever it is, happens. This is the idea of anti-fragility. And it is possible, it is quite reasonable to argue that cities are, as organisms, anti-fragile in this sense, and that planning can fragilize them by forcing it rigidly to take specific forms, by blocking certain autonomous, spontaneous capacity of the system to co-evolve, to find local solutions, bottom-up, that kind of thing. So I think the anti-fragility might be conceptually more fertile concept rather than robustness or resilience. I don't know if you're acquainted, maybe we can continue discussing during the coffee break. Okay, thank you.
At this general level, robustness is problematic because you are not changing.
Exactly.
So to evolve, you have to be somewhere in the middle, not too fragile, not too robust. As far as you talk about real city, you cannot estimate properly the robustness because you don't know the parameters. You will never know the parameters properly to understand what is really the domain of attraction of this or that equilibria into the city. So that's the reason I put so much attention to the games. In the games you have serious games, you have different people. So if your sample is large enough, you have a distribution of behaviors. So you can play, you can put behaviors which are on the one side of distribution, on the other side of the distribution. If you still get the dynamics that takes you to it in the proper way, it means your dynamics is sufficiently robust to get to the place you want. And maybe the additional dimension that will happen in a year or two will change this direction. So I would say that the robustness is a little bit more a nice theoretical concept than the reality of the city. I'm really convinced that most important in the city is the kind of the characteristic time. See, that is what we forget, that some processes are very fast, some are slow, and we try to manage that in the same way when we develop models. We are modelers, we are not public planners. Intuitively, they are much closer to the reality than we are. So we have to get there with all our knowledge or our understanding. And that's my understanding. Robustness is a little bit ununderstandable situation in reality.
Obviously, we can continue during the coffee break. Itzhak, do you have a gift for you?
Okay. So it will be new fashion in Tel Aviv. Yeah. Great. Okay. Just for let's get together.